You know I'm going to get that. Stephen Finn.
I'll count my lucky chickens.
In the tavern for lunchtime. Perfect.
But with a poorly bottom.
We bought a racehorse a couple of years ago from Jeremy Kyle.
How sore was your bottom?
Slightly annoying. I didn't let it ruin my day.
Hello and welcome to Under the Lid, the pro cricket show with me, Jack Brooks.
And me, Katherine Sciver-Brunt.
As always, this podcast is brought to you in partnership with The Cricketer and the PCA. And this is an extra special episode as we have our boss, if you like, in for a chat as our special guest, which we'll come to in a moment. But how are you, Brunty? You survived Lords?
Just about. That was a whirlwind of 3 days, not 5. We like to get the job done, don't we? But yeah, since then, I've had a great time at home, but with a poorly bottom.
Nice. Moving on. Next.
I think you've sent that gastro stuff all the way over to the East Midlands, so I'm still struggling, to be fair. That's why I look a little bit like death.
You look great, mate.
Death warmed up. But I've I had to send Natalie off on Friday morning to Danny Wyatt's hen do in a full-blown cowgirl outfit. I can see a horrible plastic crocodile skinned cowgirl boots to my left.
Excellent.
So that was fun. All the videos and pictures from that looked like they had a great time.
Can you
so
just
I'm a bit
confirm
jealous
as well? I tuned into the game, and as soon as I turned it on, you're in the commentary box chatting gaff straight away, so the volume went up. And then you dropped in that you went to the wrong ground, literally after having spoken to you that day where we did a podcast record, and you still went to the wrong ground.
I'm ashamed. That was obviously my second stint at Lords. So I had a great week at the Test, and then my next one was at Lords. But the following week, I'm at the Oval tomorrow, and then 2 days after that, I think I'm at the Oval again. So I was like, I'm at the Oval today. So I was really proud of myself because I'm getting used to the underground now and like my routes and Northern Lines and Victoria Lines and everything. And I was making my way there like, I've really got this down packed. And I can see the Oval coming up like 5 stops away, and I'd already been on a bit. And I was like, what Oval today? No, like I'm not at the Oval today. And then I had to jump. Luckily, the very literally as I thought that, we just stopped at London Bridge. I popped off on the Jubilee line, and that was the end of that. But it was slightly annoying, but I didn't let it ruin my day.
That's comedy gold, mate. That's
genius. I did get ripped to shreds for that though. And I was very hot and bothered, and it's been very, very hot the last few days.
Yeah, it's been glorious, hasn't it?
Can't say I'm enjoying. How have you managed your cricket in the blistering heat?
Cricket, not so bad. It's just having a baby in that heat is tough to try and keep them cool, especially at night. It obviously makes sleeping tough, but is what it is, isn't it? Another challenging episode in parenting. Had a couple of days coaching last week. One day was Surrey at finals day at Wormsley. Unfortunately, we lost in the semi straight away.
Oh no!
I hung around a little while to watch a bit of the final. Somerset and Yorkshire were both there, and a few people I knew were watching, so it was good to sort of socialise for a bit. Did a day with Saka as well at the South Asian Cricket Academy, who had a game on Thursday at Portland Road against Warwickshire, sort of 50 over friendly, if you like. So that was good. Another one of their Saka lads has been signed as well, so that takes it up to, nice. I think, 9 or 10 now. Saka lads have had pro contracts in the last 3 years. Hisham Khan is the latest one, who Worcester have signed for the 50 over comp. So another good story there. Good. Yeah, it's been a fantastic initiative, isn't it? And just at home, just sort of filling a skip because I've got loads of crap in the garage I need to sort out. Trying to sort something out in my garage. So, yeah, not exciting.
Are you trying to get a gym built like me?
There's already a watt bike in there, and I could probably do a little bit more equipment, but it's more just so it gets my missus off my couch because it's an absolute hole in there. Apparently,
there's always something that needs to be done. Always,
yeah, exactly. But all good. Shall we move on to our guest? What do we know about him?
Yes, let's do that for sure. Well, cricket is always, in the news for what's happening on the field, but this week, we're going to go a little bit deeper. Still a cricketer, mind. Let's not forget that first and foremost. But obviously, this guest this week is heavily involved in the PCA and really knows a lot about what goes on behind the scenes, away from the cameras. Obviously, knows a lot about the scheduling, which we've had obviously lots of grumblings about. I think we talk about it weekly, don't we? And then he'll be able to fill us in on the expansion of the women's game, along with everything else that's going on. So, yeah, I can't really wait to get this one on because I think we're going to touch on loads of stuff that we do weekly but don't really get like answers about. So it's going to be great to finally get to the crux.
Yeah, get proper under the lid with him. There's probably not many
Pressure.
who would know as much what's going on as our guests. As a player, though, seriously talented, been around for a bloody long time. I think he made his debut when he was about 9 for Glamorgan. He's younger than me, but played for a lot longer. But our careers have sort of intertwined a little bit, and we've played against each other a lot. Had the pleasure of spending a few winters with him in England Lions programs and tours. One of the great men in the game. He's played for Glamorgan, Middlesex, now back at Glamorgan. As I said, England Lions. He went on an England ODI tour, I believe, to New Zealand once a few years ago as well. Got very close to playing for England. But for the last couple of years, potentially his biggest achievement, certainly off field, is he's been chairman of the PCA since 2021. So that is what we want to tap into him about, mainly. So shall we get our chairman, the esteemed James Harris, into Under the Lid for a chat?
Good morning, both.
Morning, for a change. It's normally
No, it's nice. I'm a morning person. This is nice to do in the morning.
You in a cave?
I'm in my loft, sort of in the house. We sort of turned it into a bit of an office, but it doesn't look quite as good on camera. Really, you can't see the rest of the room behind me. But hey, you two are pros at this now. What number podcast is this? How many have you done?
That's a very good question. 16 or 17? I think we're halfway.
I'm in
17.
I'm in great hands.
Have you been listening?
Yeah, I've been listening to a few. I'm doing a fair bit of driving, as you both will know. Playing cricket, you drive around a fair amount around the country.
Yes.
So I've always got it on in the car amongst various other things. But yeah, it's been really good. Well done. You guys have done really well.
Thank you very much, mate.
We've had a bit of feedback actually. I've had some people say they quite enjoyed the Ravi and the OHD one. So yeah,
it's Cookie's little black book is still my favorite clip we've had so far.
That's mine.
That's very good.
It's a belter, isn't it? How old are you now? I can't remember. You're mid-30s, aren't you?
Well, my hair's kind of fallen out. / I've cut it all off. Probably 34. Yeah, Catherine's right. 34 I am now. Yeah, so I crept a bit older.
And you made your debut 16, 17.
It was a week before my 17th birthday. So Trent Bridge 2007. Wow. I played. The year before, just as T20 was sort of going into day-night cricket, there was a few counties around the place with floodlights. So I think there was 4. There were sort of 4 counties played in a little sort of round-robin-y day-nighty T20 comp in 2006. So I played one of those when I was sort of 16. And then first class game in 2017, just before my 17th birthday.
A long time ago, mate. You've been around the block, haven't you? You've seen it all.
Look, you could say that. I mean, it feels like a different lifetime ago. You see people come through academies and stuff now at sort of 19, 20, and I'd already had sort of 2 or 3 full seasons. I mean, I left Morgan at 22 to go to Middlesex, and, having had, quite a few full seasons, we went away on some Lions trips, went away on some fast bowling camps, sort of as you alluded to in the intro bit, but it feels like a different lifetime.
Ups, though, weren't they? Let's be honest.
Well, some of them were. Some of them were more serious than others. Yeah, we had some fun. There was some fun bits, definitely. There was a lot of training. There was a lot of early gym sessions and various things along the way. But we tried to have some fun. But yeah, it feels like a long time now. This is season number 19, I think, something like that. So it's played a massive part of my life.
And plenty more mileage to come yet, mate. I know you talked briefly the other week about potential steps outside of the game.
Yeah, I've taken some interesting turns in that in the last couple of years, none more so than at the moment. I started a chiropractic degree, which I told you about in the middle of January. So that'll take way too long, more time than we've got on this podcast to talk about why and what I'm going to do. But it's quite a specific sort of form of chiropractic I'll do, and I hope to do and qualify for when I finish. But yeah, I want to play for a bit more yet. I don't feel like I'm quite done. So yeah, I'm still not.
Well,
I'm doing the rehab and not hating it to a point where I want to stop. So that normally says that you've got a bit left.
Yeah,
is the
100%,
chiropractic
mate.
thing linked to anything specific? Like, is it become a bit of a passion because you want to try and fix things related to specifically cricket, or to try and work out what correlates between the two? Because there's not much there on cricket and how to sort of. Well, it's a unique thing, isn't it? Bowlers' actions are absolutely feral. It's not
Absolutely.
a good
So
thing.
this started. Colin Ingram was one of my teammates at Glamorgan. Turned up when I went back to Glammy from Middlesex in a set of sort of barefoot shoes instead of Vivo barefoots. And this was before they were kind of as popular as they are now. This is a couple of years ago. So I asked him about it, quizzed him on it, and he mentioned a friend of his who's a chiropractor who's done a huge amount of work with him and kept his career going. He thought that 4 or 5 years ago, he was nearly done. I went to go and see him on the fact that I understand that I've spent the last 20, 25 years of my life trying to bowl, reasonably swiftly, and know how bad that is for my body. So I was scared that when I get to 40, 50, 60 and older, that I'd be in a bit of trouble. So I kind of went to see him on that basis, and he did some things now that's really helped. I used to have this like sort of chronic side strain that was always the first thing to go when I'd bowl too much. That would always be something in my side, really high up, sort of around the back. That would always be the first thing, and we could never get rid of it, no matter what gym sessions I did and all that. So I went to see Steve, which is a gentleman in London, and after a few sessions, that's gone, and that's never come back. And I haven't had that for 3 or 4 years, which kind of sort of sparked my interest in this. And I went for more and more treatment, started feeling better, posture started improving. And then he randomly, out the blue, I was going down the route of doing some financial advice qualifications, wondering what I was going to do coming out of the game, and he floated it past me about doing it. And I thought, jeepers, that's going to be a hard slog. It's pretty hard to do a medical degree at the best of times, let alone when I just got a little girl now, like Brooksy. So we've got a young little girl in the house, and trying to do this job as chair of the PCA, trying to play. I thought, jeepers, how am I going to fit that in? So we're sort of managing to make it work. So I started part-time in January. There's a lot of stuff going on. I've sort of made it work so far. But yeah, it's going to be a sort of 5-year slog to try and get to the end of it and juggle some bits.
Mate, that's serious struggling.
Nothing worth doing or having a passion for comes easy, does it? It's always hard work, but worth it in the end. So I hope that works out for you, James.
Thanks.
That sounds great. I love that you've related that and you want to sort of help that in your own way. So that's great. I love that. Shall we move on to the PCA role that you have, which I'm sure you'll be happy about, because there's a lot to delve into. Just for our listeners who don't really know what the PCA is, Professional Cricketers Association, what's their role and yours, I guess, in the game?
So I'll go mine first. So I mean, my role as sort of chairman of the PCA is essentially just to be the player's voice, and to voice that as loud as humanly possible for what they want at the ECB, in the press, and everything else. To sort of be a de facto sports spokesperson, I suppose, to make sure that the players' voice is being heard, and that when important decisions are being made, that we have a seat at the table. Really, and this follows in a line of some. I've been very lucky to follow in a line of some great people who've done this role before. It's kind of voted in by the rest of the players, so anybody who is interested, when the role comes up, can put a sort of little manifesto together with the direction they think the game should go, and then the players at all the counties and the women's regions, as it is now, all have a vote, really, and then you get kind of voted on that basis. And you can do two. It's a 2-year term. You can do 2 2-year terms, of which I'm going to come to the end to, roughly at the start of this year and into the beginning of next. And that's the end of it then, I suppose, for me. So it'll be me passing it on to kind of whoever is the next person who'd like to take it forward. It's been a fascinating couple of years. I know we'll talk about a few things now, but just trying to understand the crux of how the game works, all the decisions that have to be made, and all the things that have to be put in place before we all would have turned up at cricket grounds and things just work and you start on time at 11 o'clock or whatever time the game starts. It's it's quite fascinating, the conversations that has to happen behind the scenes.
Yeah, it sounds. I mean, I've been on a couple of boards myself now, and there's a lot to them. There's a lot to find out and a lot of head scratching to do. So, yeah, I mean, it'll probably be in quite a not fact finding time, but like a very probably frustrating too, because you're there representing the players, and that you're the players' player that they put forward, and you've got to try and sort all this out for them and be the voice for them. And it can be quite frustrating, isn't it, when you have to go to, I don't know, through several months and stuff to just sort out one issue. Like, that must be one of the most frustrating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, look, there's a lot of things to it. I mean, you're always trying to negotiate with, we've kind of got three parties relatively, and we've got us as the players, the ECB, and the counties and the women's regions, who obviously now will transition to be part of the sort of counties as well, I suppose, from next year and kind of going forward with the new tiered system in the women's game. Trying to negotiate that, trying to get everybody on the same page, trying to make everybody see things from a sort of playing side, which, if you don't shout loud enough about these things from players' side, things get lost. I mean, you touched on the schedule already. It's very easy if we didn't have much of a voice or we weren't aligned on certain things for that bit to get lost, right? And there are players, male and female, doing things that they shouldn't be doing. There are drives being undertaken at ridiculous times in the night after games and going home and having to wake up and get to bed at 1 a.m. and wake up and play another game that night and all sorts of things. So there's a lot of things to sort. It is frustrating at times because you want to shake some people and make them trying to see how the whole thing works from your side. I'm sure the people sat in the offices and making decisions, we want to see us to see their side sometimes, and how they have to keep sponsors and various things happy. But ultimately, without the players, there isn't a game, and we need to make sure that that the players have within reason the best possible working conditions and everything else that they possibly can. So I'll keep fighting hard for all of that.
Yeah, because obviously in injuries they need to be prevented, not rehabbed. Like, prehab is more important than rehab. So it's like, how do we keep our very best players entertaining people? Because if they're not, it is a fact. You do lose numbers, you do lose bums on seats. So you got to protect people first and foremost. And for many years, like I'll just take Nat, for instance. You want to get her to 35, having played 15, 20 years for England. You want to get the most out of your asset. Do you know what I mean? It's funny, like, looking at it from a business perspective, because we're humans. But it is a business. There is money involved. It is entertainment product, and it's hard to be human, and especially when you're governed by the money from Sky, BBC, people like that. I forgot what that's called, something rights. They control it a lot, don't they? So the wiggle room in the schedule is so hard because you're determined by how much you've sold to them, etc.
Massively, and that's a huge part. That's a huge part of all this, right? Because without that money coming into the game doesn't function itself, right? You don't have the players, you don't have the talent pool, you don't have the resources, you don't have the number of coaches you need and the facilities and everything else, which we need to continually keep investing in. So there is a massive negotiation point to be had on this. From a men's side at the moment, the schedule is so congested. We're trying to try and smooth that out somewhat. It's come out a little bit as we might need to get rid of the odd game here or there. And I'm having arguments with, members on the boundary about, back in the day, whatever they used to play 30 odd 3-day games, they used to travel, they play a couple of days and they travel halfway across the country, play on a Sunday league game, travel back to finish whatever first class game they were playing. And that's all absolutely right. But it doesn't mean it was the best way to do things. It was a very different game back then, and it's evolving all the time. And my kind of personal views, it's very hard to compare between eras, right? The era that played 20, 30 years ago was very different. The era that we're playing now is very different to that. And the era that I'm going to finish up in very soon, and kind of the three of us, I suppose, have gone through, is going to be very different to the era in 20 years' time with, what's going on, the money involved, the pressures, social media pressures, the things that, have all kind of evolved through our time playing, I suppose. Every ball that's bowled now in male or female cricket at first team level is on camera.
Yeah.
What that then means is that everyone's watching and everyone's pouring into information, into stats, into who plays this well, who plays that well, how am I going to get the best out of them. Every dismissal is poured over, whereas back in the day, you'd have slogged it up in the air, no one had realised, and you'd have gone into the next game. And that's just one difference you can pick out, I suppose, from just that.
Unfortunately, there's still a lot of, I guess, men over the age of 70 still in charge of a lot of boards and etc., and still have that old school way of going about stuff. So it's great to have young voices on boards who represent the players. And how do they get their thoughts through to you? Do they just text you like, "Oh, James, I'm really annoyed this week. Will you sort it out?"
Yeah, some of them do. I mean, look, my phone number and my email and everything else is plastered all over the place. So if people want to get in touch with me, they absolutely can. The kind of structure we have is there is, a players rep kind of at every county, at every women's region, who are the kind of, go-to contact for the players in that team if they want to go through that, as well as the kind of PDMs or the personal development managers that we've got around the country who help the players out with various things going on in their lives. There are routes and avenues to go down if you want to come and raise things, and players do. We get together as a group of reps on sort of Zoom calls and video calls like this where we can, because they're obviously spread all over the country. We'll try and get together in person a couple of times a year, normally pre-season and post. We'll normally try and get the reps together, maybe take them away to have some chats and do some productive stuff and try and get those views across. So yeah, we feel like, especially in the last couple of years, those communication channels have got a lot better. So we definitely know more about what the players want and how the players feel. It's challenge. That's a challenge at times as well, because, you've got everybody from, myself at 34, you've got some players around the country who are older, you've got some players who are younger, you've got obviously all the women involved as well, you've got white ball players, red ball players, people who play everything. And they all want different things as well, right? There are red ball players around the country who don't want to lose out on, a championship game here or there, or don't want to cut that down. So, we can't go and say this is the best option for the schedule. But what we can go and say is, we actually think there should be some sort of minimum standards put in place for how much break there is between games. You can't have people turning up really late at night back at home or wherever they are in whatever hotel to get in at 1 a.m. to then, go and play the next day. That's not acceptable in our view. So it's more the bit we're searching for is more a minimum standard, sort of something to put in place so that we can, ensure the safety and that everyone can perform as well as they can, because ultimately that's, what we want to achieve.
The schedule's such a big talking point. We've mentioned it to pretty much every guest, and you hear a lot, you see a lot. It annoys me when you get people who aren't in the modern game talking about it, saying, this day and age, going to like you said, a 3-day game and then a 1-day game, then come back and finish the 3. It was ridiculous. Like, you look at the state of a lot of old players, older pros, they're physically absolutely goners. A lot of them have had serious mental health issues. Financially, they're not as well off. So obviously there's a lot of differences now in the game where you've actually got to, look after yourself in the future a bit more. A lot of this is, at the end of the day, sort of trying to support the current players, isn't it? And make the game a bit better and just the welfare. But I suppose the big question is, like, this isn't probably a one-word answer or even an answer. What can actually realistically change?
So we need to get everyone around the table to make everybody see that this is, a bigger problem. I don't think they kind of, what we're shouting about, the people perhaps sat around the table, in the boardrooms don't realize this is as much of a problem as it is for the people playing the game. If you look at some of the stats, right, so we did some stuff pre-season to try and get some proper statistics to take in on what players feel. So 76% of the players said the fixtures caused them safety concerns regarding traveling. 81% said it was concerns from a physical perspective. 62% concerns from a mental health perspective. I mean, these are big percentages of our players, of our members, who are concerned with, key aspects of the kind of job and the life. Look, there's always going to be stresses. You're playing professional sport. You're going to be asked to do things which are hard physically, mentally. Do you know what I mean? You have to play when you're really struggling, really down. That's part of the game, right? We're not trying to get away from that. But the schedule is such a part that plays into that. So how do we smooth it out? How do we make things better? Do we need to cut a game or two? Very possibly. Do you mean what we've seen in the last couple of years is the hundreds come in, taken the entirety of August, and everything else has largely been squeezed either side. Now, some people like the 100, some people hate the 100. The 100's been a fabulous thing for the game. It's going to shore up the finances of the game for years to come. It's provided a brilliant thing for the women's game. It's opened that up, putting the women's games alongside the men's games has opened, that side of the game up to a huge audience that perhaps wouldn't have necessarily got to it at that time period. It's advanced that. We're seeing, how much that's changed with the new tier structure. That's been pushed forward purely because the 100 got us on that road really early. So the 100's been brilliant, but it's caused some problems, right? That's just what's happened in the schedule. So we need to smooth this out to make sure that the rest of the game can survive as well as possible. We want the best players to come through playing the best possible cricket, to play for their county, so it's the best standard of cricket you can possibly come to watch. And then hopefully they go on to be the best players we can produce to go and play for England. that's to be the goal of the whole system. So we want to smooth that out somewhat to make sure that players aren't being asked to do things that, quite frankly, nobody would be asked to do in their jobs these days, across the board in a lot of things.
Yeah, mate. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, really. The 100 has changed things dramatically the last couple of years. Before the 100, for me, there wasn't always too much cricket. It's just the schedule was quite packed. Obviously, they reduced championship cricket, and you still got to have a worthwhile 4-day competition for me. 2020 cricket, it makes a lot of money for counties. You want to keep the CEOs and supporters happy. You want to have your X amount of home games, which turn over a lot of revenue for a lot of the clubs. And then the 50 over comp, which there's so many views on that from players, whether you're a senior player, young player, rightly or wrongly. But for me, 8 games in 15 days is house. Like, that's just, to put it bluntly, it's ridiculous. I've played in it for 3 years, and didn't even train for it. You literally just go home, turn up at the next game, whatever it was, in a bit of a daze, and then crack on with it. I get that, England still play 50 over cricket, and they didn't do very well the last World Cups. But then, if none of the top players are playing that comp, why are you playing so many games? Surely that can be condensed a little bit. There's so much that can be changed, but you're never going to get everyone happy, are you? Like, that's the problem. You're never going to appease every single, whether it be players, support staff, chairman, CEOs, people who run the game, supporters. Like, it's impossible, isn't it?
Pretty much. I mean, look, everybody got their back up when Andrew Strauss did his sort of report a few years back, and that got pushed out into the press, and that was cutting cricket quite drastically. There's a lot of players who thought that was too much, right? So we're not talking about a huge reduction in cricket here. We're talking about some smarter scheduling, maybe a game or two here or there. Look, at the moment in the Blast, there are 7 home games. Should that go to 5? I've had conversations, with a lot of people about if we have slightly less home games and we spread them out a bit more and we market them well, we could get the same number of people through the gates as we would across 7 games. So can we do something like that? Do we need 14 championship games? Could we cut it by a couple? Are there smarter ways to do things? Do we need to look at days of the week the games are played on? We play 4-day cricket, for example. We start the season, we play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday every week. Well, if we changed that we play Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday 1 week, and then we pushed it out another day or two here or there, then yes, we might start the next game on a Saturday, but that might mean that everybody can recover slightly better and we, just smooth things out a little bit. So I think there are ways and means. We haven't got to cut anything drastically. It just needs some smarter scheduling and sitting down and trying to find the best route for all parties, I think.
Yeah, mate. Well, you're the noise at the top, mate. You're good luck with hitting some pen to paper on that and trying to work a schedule or help work a schedule out. I know there was one thing I want to touch on when the women's game with the PCA. How has the PCA helped the women's game the last couple of years? Obviously, there's been massive changes, all positive, hopefully. Brunty will know more than me, and I'm sure she can get into this a little bit more than me. But do you reckon it would be good now to align with lining the teams into counties going forward?
So, I think the big message for the most part that's come out of this from a women's side of things is equality. How can we make things more equal for the women compared to the men's game? That's been the biggest thing. So some of the great things to come out recently, we're going to go into this tiered structure. The women's game is going to change again. As of next year, we're going to have 8, teams, tier 1 teams that are going to be attached to counties. The counties are going to take them on. They're going to be, Surrey ladies and Lancashire ladies and, around the country, which is going to be a great thing. So what that means is that hopefully, or they will, they'll have a permanent home at one of the counties with one of the, the same rights as the men sort of thing. They'll be able to train the same and everything else compared to, so I'll give you an example of sort of the Western Storm, which is a team down in my part of the world in the southwest, have been a little bit at Glamorgan, a little bit at Somerset. They've been kind of here, there and everywhere training, and that's not uncommon. That's been quite similar for a lot of the women's teams. So that's going to give them, a fabulous base to be able to set up their lives, train, have an equal standing, compared to some of the men around the country, which is brilliant. Salaries are increasing. We've been pushing that, trying to push equality in that. So I think minimum salaries are going to be, the same across the board, men and women's game. Brilliant. Futures Fund, there's something that's come up. The Futures Fund's been something brilliant that kind of got set up by Daryl Mitchell, who was in my role previous to me, to try and take care of the male players as they transition out of the game. And, the women's game has been getting built out in the last few years, and we've been getting more and more full-time female contracts. Obviously, brilliant now from next year. We're going to have 8 full-time teams with 15 players, all full-time professionals. So we need to build that futures fund into the women's game from now, so that when women transition out of the game, just like the men, there is a pot there to be able to say thank you very much for your service to cricket, your service to the game. Here is something hopefully to help you to be able to transition into your kind of next stage of life and your next career. So, slowly but surely, all of this is coming through, and we're getting to a brilliant point where the women's game's expanding, and the equality across the board between male and female cricket is getting better, and very, very close now to being exactly the same and aligned. So it's still going to take some time. There's still bits to sort, but it's getting there.
I wonder why that couldn't have happened. Obviously, the Future Fund thing, I've played for England for 20 years, and, it's a thank you on Instagram, thanks for coming sort of situation. And the issue for me was we've been professional since 2014. Like all 9 years prior to that, actually 10 years prior to that I was playing. There was no sort of, obviously, way to see something as good as that come into the women's side of the game. But since 2013-14, where we became professional, I would have thought that conversation would have come into play. Because obviously the pension side of it was very difficult too. My pension is the same as Natalie's. Our pension worths are the same, even though I've played for England 10 years more than her. It's things like this are just, and that was us both finishing on the same-ish salary as well. So all sort of level pegging. It blows my mind how, do you know what I mean? Somebody 10 years behind, even though coming into that professional part, as it's taken 10 years to get to this stage, past being professional, to actually start doing professional things. Maternity clauses literally come in the last, 6 months to a year, proper ones. And then obviously the pension schemes and the future funds. Yeah, it's so slow moving, but I do understand. I'm not silly. There's obviously revenue plays a big part in that, and the counties contributing to it, which is how the men's works. So how will the women's work if the counties be contributing towards that fund?
That's what we're aiming for. So I'll go through a few of those things that you mentioned there. I struggle to speak to some of the bits going back sort of as far as, when you start playing for England and everything else, because I was just a player, I suppose, through that period. I didn't have the kind of knowledge about the rest of the game and as much as I do now. So I don't know exactly what the kind of scenario was back in the day. So just as a bit of I'll explain the features of the Futures Fund, I suppose. You wouldn't have, because you would have had an England Central contract the whole way through. You wouldn't have accrued kind of credits for the Futures Fund, same way that the men's centrally contracted players don't accrue any now. So the way the Futures Fund works is it's based on the team salary payments that the counties pay. So the counties effectively, so the England contracts are separate from obviously that team salary payment. They're paid centrally by the ECB. So for every year you hold a county contract, I suppose, you accrue kind of credits. Or you get credited, I suppose, for your contribution to kind of county cricket, I suppose, through that period. So that's paid purely by the counties. So, for example, a colleague of mine, Stephen Finn, who would have had a central contract for 7-8 years, possibly, but played for better part of 20. Those 7 or 8 years wouldn't have counted towards his kind of futures fund payment. So what we're trying to do now is obviously build that out in the women's game to be exactly the same mechanism, really, so that the counties, as they come on board now next year, will be contributing into a pot that the players on retirement will be able to kind of access and get a contribution towards, to say thank you for their kind of part they've played in the game. It's frustrating that things don't move faster. Trust me, I'm fully on board with you on that. We've been talking about all these things for a long time.
Has that ever, have the PCA or ECB looked at other, basically Australia? Let's just go Australia, how they do it and how they have been doing it. So let's just take, for instance, Elise Perry has been playing as long as me. I might have played a couple more years. She will walk away with a futures fund, and probably, I think, between $500,000 and $1 million, for example. Does the PCA or ECB ever look into how the leading countries in world cricket do these things?
Yeah, but that's kind of done slightly differently. So you'll know about this, but you'll know about the England Women's Player Partnership, same as TEP, so the Team England Player Partnership. They kind of sit as a slightly separate entity to us. So they effectively run those contracts. The England Women's Player Partnership will negotiate on behalf of the England Women, and TEP or the Team England Player Partnership will kind of negotiate with ECB on behalf of the men. And that's slightly separate to like the wider game, the wider sort of PCA kind of standpoint, I suppose. So there'd be perks in the England men's and England women's contracts, will be purely focused on the negotiation with them and the ECB, because you take out the county element in that, compared to the county game or the domestic game, which, that money filters from the ECB into the counties, and then the counties kind of run their business on that sort of behalf, even though the ECB have a say, I suppose, in how some of that money has to get spent, and salary caps and collars and how much, they've deemed fair for the counties and the women's regions to spend on players and everything else. But it's been a slow process to get some of these things through. There's still niggly points, there's still arguing points, but it feels as though we're kind of shifting very much in the right direction with a lot of these things. And that equality point that we're trying to get across is being built out, maybe not as quick as we'd all like, but, we're trying to move that forward as fast as we can. And, if we had our way, that it would have been done many years ago, I think. But, it's getting there, but perhaps a bit slower than we'd all like.
And I just feel like a personal attack. Sorry. I got going then. No, I'm like, I'm not a bitter old hag. It's more, I'm actually really proud of everything I've done over the last 2 decades of, paying for my own kit to, I don't know, rocking up on some tour where it's just so village, representing a cool country, to playing in front of a packed house at Lords and winning the Ashes, and then being a central contracted person to sharing a dressing room at the 100. Like, it's come so far. It's unreal. Yes, it's frustrating. It takes time, but I'm so happy with where it is. Also, I want to get that out there. I'm not miserable. I am very happy, and I'm so glad that somebody close to me is reaping the rewards of all that I guess you, as Jack as well, you paved the way for. So somebody has to go through that. Do you know what I mean? So it's like these things take time, but it's people like you and the one before you, one after you, that just keep pushing that player's view of it, where we sound like we're moaning, but it's all for the greater good, because the world's a scary place now and things are ever changing, and these things need to be taken care of. Mental health is probably, one of the most important things now. So yeah, equality and changing the minimum standard is where it sort of comes first, and I guess that's where the negotiations are now.
Pretty much. Look, this is happening across. This has happened across sport through eras, right? You look at Premier League footballers of 20 years ago. They got nowhere near the pay and the perks and everything else, and you just got lucky or unlucky by where you were in where you had your career and what sort of time. And that's unfortunately how things pan out at times. There was the people who retired the year before the Futures Fund started, didn't have access to it. And is it fair? Probably not. But these things sort of have to start at some point, and unfortunately, that's how those things have to work at some point. But look, a lot of things that I'm fighting for now, I'll probably never see and be privy to. We're looking at trying to change the schedule, and already the can's sort of been kicked too far down the road to kick anything for 2025, but we're really hopeful now, and we're going to push incredibly hard to make sure that 2026 from a men's side is that schedule sort of gets some changes and some positive changes. That's coming right towards the back end of my career, so I might not even see any of the bits of that, but you kind of feel that while you're here in a time, and I'm just a keeper of this role while I've got it, and I just want to make sure that if I can say thank you to the kind of game or the people who come after me for everything the game's given me, then that's what I'm going to try and do for the sort of last few years of my playing career. And I hope I can kind of carry it as well as possible, I suppose, while I'm here.
Yeah, and I'm sure you are, James. It could be worse, couldn't it? We could all be on the front line with a life expectancy of 3 months. So I'll count my lucky chickens that I got to play cricket as a hobby. Did you want to say something about the counties, Jack?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, well, just before I got onto that, just wanted to finish a little bit more on the 100. hundreds of, like you said, it's been so good to secure the game financially in this country, and it's brought on the women's game by so much. Like, how important has it been for the women's game and for equality? And secondly, do you foresee it staying after its current contract, or whatever you want to call it, expired?
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, look, from a women's game perspective, I think, look, let's be honest, the ECB got a little bit lucky. So COVID happened. It wasn't planned out the way that it turned out. Do you know what I mean? The women weren't necessarily supposed to be playing all their games alongside the men's games at the big ground. COVID kind of forced that as a bit of a, this has to happen. This makes life much easier because we can just have, both teams at one ground and it's much easier to host. The follow on from that has been this incredible surge of, interest, quality, everything that everyone's seen from the women's side of the 100 that's, pushed it in the direction it's gone. It's been incredible. It's pushed the game, the women's game, so far, so quickly. It's opened a shop window for some of the girls to show their talents against the best players around the world on TV, at the big grounds, in front of big crowds. And that is going to be, one of the big, massive moments looking back in women's cricket, particularly in this country. Is it going to carry on looking like that? I've got absolutely zero idea. To be perfectly honest, it's really exciting from the plan is to use this 100 window now, which kicks off this week, as basically a shop window to try and sell, private equity stakes in the 100, which is going to bring hopefully massive amount of finances into the game across the board and shore it up for years to come. I don't know the nitty-gritty kind of details about all of those things yet. And I don't know how it's going to look in the future. But what I do know is that, cricket will be in a pretty safe place in what is a challenging time around the world for a lot of people and businesses and sports and all sorts of things. You see the problems happening in rugby and the issues they're going through and everything else. So to know that cricket's relatively speaking pretty safe and on a good path is certainly quite a nice thing to feel, but how it looks going through the future, I'm not entirely sure about which direction of travel it takes. But look, without it, and this is what everyone needs to understand, I hope people do understand, particularly the ones who dislike it, I don't know what sort of place cricket would be in looking forward right now if we didn't have it.
Yeah.
Right. So from everything you can throw the ECB for, their handling of the whole thing and how they designed it and the rules and everything else, it's been incredible for the game, and we should be very thankful that they made that decision when they did.
There's enough of the heavy stuff for now, mate. Let's try and have a little bit of fun now. Moving on, let's try and have a bit of a light-hearted nature. So now we're on to the segment. You'll know this. We're on to the Cricket Archive guest stat alert siren. Now, we've got a stat for you, but also we're going to ask you a question involved with it as well. Bronte,
okay.
You're up?
I'm up. That was great time, by the way, Jack. I think that's best yet. Well done. With a little point as well. Your best bowling figures is 9 for 34 against Middlesex v Durham at Lords in 2015. Who took the other wicket in that innings?
Oh, I'm going to get that. Stephen Finn. So it was a back of a length ball to Usman Arshad, and Usman Arshad nicked it onto his inner thigh and got caught gully somewhere. Yeah, I'm sure Finny. I think Finny mentioned it on the radio the other day as it happened.
Excellent.
But yeah, I think it was the 8th one. I think I had 7. I think Finny got the 8th one, and then I got the last 2. But yeah, that feels like a long time ago now as well.
That's nearly 10 years ago, mate, and I remember it because I was obviously playing for Yorkshire at the time in a similar. That was obviously the years when Middlesex Yorkshire were jousting, and I was like, bloody hell! I was obviously chuffed to bits for you as a mate, but I was like, yeah, he's taking 9 for it, Lord. That's not bad, is it? Good effort.
It was a good day out. I tell you what, it was one of those days. So Timmy Murtagh got injured, pulled a hamstring first innings, and it was an unbelievable game because that's kind of been forgotten about a little bit. So we got 430, Sam Robson got 150. I think we bowled Durham out for 280 odd, maybe something like that, maybe 300, and we all walked off as a group of bowlers, kind of high-fiving, really happy. I went back into bat. We were 37 for 7. About an hour later, it was just one of those days where it clouded over at Lords and it was dark and gloomy after being really sunny for 2 days. We got bowled out for 80. I think Stephen Finn, Timmy Murtagh, last wicket put on about 35. And then we rocked up next day. I think I got 2 wickets that night and we bowled them out for 70 or something like that. So we won comfortably in the end, but it was a crazy game.
Lovely.
in the tavern for lunchtime. Perfect.
Yeah, it was good in the bowler's bar. In the bowler's bar, and your whites and your playing cap. That's what it was. Yeah, that was always good fun.
Excellent. Moving on to our update on the PCA MVP so far after a week in the game. We finally got a bowler in the top 2 of the Blast MVP. David Payne, absolutely unreal for Gloucestershire this year. Gloucestershire have qualified for the quarterfinals as well. And he's on 235 MVP points. Easy for you to say. Just 5 behind Birmingham Bears' Dan Mousley, who obviously all-rounder. All-rounders obviously dominate this comp. England MVP at the minute. Ollie Pope is top, and former underlid guest is just ahead of Gus Atkinson and Harry Brook, who's been on here as well. You're an esteemed company there, Bones, by the way.
I think that's you. That's the work of you two, getting the best guests on.
It's great to see Paney at the top, Bones. I know you'll probably sing his praises as a fellow bowler as well. But who have you seen this year that's impressed you, and who do you back him for the overall MVP?
That's a good question. Well, first thing, I think it's been great to see Gus transition into that test team in the first couple of weeks, that he's had opportunity to do that. I mean, look, Lords was an incredible performance. I know that everybody's waxed on lyrical about Jimmy and his career and what a time kind of he had and what he gave to cricket. And look, everyone, I'm sure the 3 of us included, have looked at Jimmy at certain points and gone, right, I'm going to try and do something similar. And maybe not been quite as successful as he was through the 20 years that he managed to do it. But who's going to win the MVP? That's a great question.
Liam Dawson's my shout pre-season. He's obviously smashing it, and a few people keep chatting about him. Higgins, they're always those all-rounders around it, aren't they?
Yeah, Dawes is always a good shout. He gets runs and wickets often, which is a key component of playing, really. But I mean, he does that a lot. And
you just stick with Dawson. Join Jack.
Yeah, I think I might have to. I know Dawes well. We grew up together. We're the same age, so I'll stick with Dawson.
Yeah, there you go for your mate. Anyway, in the women's, there's been no Rachel Hayhoe Flint Trophy games in the last week, so we'll just talk about the England women's MVP, and I'm happy to say Natalie Sciver-Brunt is leading the top of the, I don't know overall or just ODI, but I do know Sarah Glenn is top of the T20 rankings, which is great. I love Sarah Glenn. She's a fantastic human and one of our under the lid guests. So
yeah, another great guest.
Yeah, well, we had Nat on as well. I just keep stringing them out, don't we?
There's a bit of a correlation here. It'd be nice if I went on a run here for the back end of the year.
You're really, finishing the season strong, mate.
What, if I get 20 wickets here in the last couple of championship games, that's going to bode really well for future guests, isn't it?
We only have
and mate, if you do well in the quiz, mate, you might end up with a decent bit of golf prize as well.
Right, next big segment, no siren for this, but it's basically the under the lids big question, and I hope you've been prepped for this because it's never good to be caught short. But we want to know we want to know, and our listeners want to know something about you that no one, or at least the closest people to you, know about you. Anything. It could be a tattoo on your butt, it could be a side DJ gig in Ibiza, it could be anything. You can play the guitar with your feet. What have you got, James?
Okay, so very few people will know this, bar my boss and a couple of other people. So there was 10 of us at Glamorgan, or sort of associated with Glamorgan, I suppose, Mark Wallace being my boss. We bought a racehorse a couple of years ago from Jeremy Kyle. So we bought a racehorse called Prince Nino from Jeremy Kyle, who bought him for an absolute boatload of money. The poor guy got injured. Went in the equivalent of going in the Achilles, I think. They put him through the operation that he needed, and decided they didn't really want to wait for him to go through all of his rehab. So we picked him up and he raced for a couple of years. Unfortunately, didn't have a great time of things. But yeah, that was
Jeremy Kyle.
Horse, mate.
Jeremy Kyle, TV personality, Jeremy Kyle. Yeah,
for the TV host. Yeah.
Gods,
I remember watching that. It's such dross.
Yeah, well, to be fair, the horse was not much better than some of the stuff you do on TV, to be honest. But
you bought an injured horse. That's great.
Is Baz McCullum a horse lover?
Yeah, Baz, Owen, and Baz are obviously big into their horses. They might have a horse together.
It's kind of an Irish thing, isn't it?
I think Jamie and Craig Overton have been to their horses a little bit. I'm sure they've got a horse.
They definitely have.
maybe with a few other people.
Addicts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guys like the horse racing, amongst many other things you can bet and gamble on, I'm sure.
I'll
but yeah, they're
stay
into the
away.
horses as well.
Dangerous.
Right, that brings us on to the last round, Bones, as you'll know this as well. This is probably the most nervous you'll be for a while. It's our quiz, the last round, where our guests get to swing from the ring, as Brunty once said early on in this lovely podcast. You'll have a 60-second timer. You answer as many questions as you can, as quickly as you can. If you don't know, just pass and get another one in. If everyone right, you get a run. And then who's
leading?
So, Ollie Hannon-Dolby, Harry Brook, and Katherine Bryce are all joint top on 8 at the minute, leading the way for probably some amazing golf prize from TaylorMade or someone like that.
Okay.
We'll keep shouting them out on it.
Are they cricket related, or are they any subject related?
So it's not general knowledge, mate. It's mainly cricket with the odd little half volley in.
Okay, let's go.
Try and get more than Ravi, because Ravi was on, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? He only got 3. He's bottom of the leaderboard at the minute.
Okay. Let's go.
Passing is crucial. Are you ready? I'm going to count you down. 3, 2, 1, go.
How many PCA reps are there currently? 32 or 36?
32.
Who did you make your first class debut against for Glamorgan in 2007?
Nottinghamshire.
Correct.
Who did you share a partnership of 197 with when you scored your maiden list day century in 2019?
John Simpson.
Yep.
In the week of your 17th birthday, what did you become the youngest player to do for Glamorgan?
I was the youngest to take 12 wickets in a first class match, county championship match.
That'll do, yeah.
10.
How long did it take you to cycle from Paris to London as part of the Trust charity bike ride in October?
17 hours.
Yeah, we'll give you that.
In what year did Sophia Gardens host its first test?
2009 Ashes.
Correct.
Yeah. Which current Pakistan opener did you dismiss in a youth test back in 2009? Currently playing in this country overseas.
Shammood.
Which
Shamasood.
legendary Welsh
Shamasood,
rugby union? I'll start, so I'll finish. Which legendary Welsh rugby union winger was also born in Morriston? How do you say this? Have I said that right?
Morriston Hospital.
Morriston.
You should know this.
I should know this.
5, 4, 3.
No, I don't want to get it so badly wrong, because I feel if I get the wrong answer, no, pass. I don't know.
Shane Williams.
That was going to be my guess, but I thought it was too obvious. Okay.
Well, it's a pretty good crack.
6, apparently. We've rounded you up to 6. But by the way, that bike ride, London to Paris bike ride, you raised 52 grand for the PCT, which is incredible.
Yeah,
we did well. We raised some really good money. It ended up being a really good group. And then me and the commercial director, PCA commercial director, Rob Smythe, decided to ride back from Paris to London in the day. So that was a different... We took a photo outside the Arc de Triomphe, and then we took a photo outside Big Ben when we got home. So we had a couple of hours.
How was your bottom?
I was tired. Yeah, that was hard work.
That's awesome, mate. Awesome. And you've been awesome today, mate. Thanks so much for getting under the lid with us. It's been great to catch up again and get some really interesting insights and information. I know Brunty would have really enjoyed it from the women's perspective as well.
Yeah, sorry for the grilling.
Getting her rants out.
No problem. Listen, thanks both. You're doing a brilliant job. Very much appreciate your time. And hopefully this is a thing that all the guests go on a bit of a run after they come on the podcast, and we can encourage more and more of the current.
I'm going to be all over you. When you finish the season strong, because you will, I'm going to be all over you saying, there we go. You know why.
There we go. We can push that narrative out to the rest of the players.
20 wickets, please.
20 more.
Good luck, legend.
Yeah, okay.
20.
Thanks both. See you soon.
See you, mate. Bye.
How good?
That was wicked.
How good was James? We've been asking for some under the lid stuff like that for ages, haven't we? So
slightly different one this week, because we obviously talked a lot more in-depth stuff that a lot of people, our listeners, may not know about. You could argue that it wasn't as light-hearted or as entertaining as some of our others, but it was actually so insightful and so important for us as players, future players, past players, anyone listening hopefully has a little bit more knowledge and insight on a few pretty gritty subjects, what's going on in the game in a minute that they're just reading about or hearing about in the media.
We had to keep the banter to a minimum this week, and the swearing. One, I think. I think it was you.
I definitely swore. I definitely did. Last bit of feedback before we wrap up. Yeah, we've had one from Dan, and he says, "My brother raves about the 100 and how it's got his kids. He's got a boy and a girl into cricket. He believes the ECB is ahead of other sports in bringing new interest into the game. They both play and watch cricket now. Do you think in the end it will have been worth all the upheaval?" I suppose we'll only really know some way into the future yet, won't we? If the financials stay there and it stabilises counties and counties don't go out of business and the county game can continue, then it's probably been worth it from the financial point of view. Otherwise, we wouldn't really have professional cricket as it is going forward, to be completely honest, whether you like it or not.
I think everybody needs to give it, if there's still any doubters out there, just remember what James said about, it's been annoying in terms of like the purity of the game being what was created, obviously, and this being a little bit different to that. But ultimately what it's brought to cricket, the financial side to it, boosting the women's game 50%, and then the future of that and what it looks like to what will happen in the next 12 to 18 months, I think is going to be the biggest eye-opening situation. I think that's the bit to look out for, not this season, which will still be great, but next season. I think that will be, an eye-opener and something so many girls and boys and men and women can just get involved in and have as a career, and a long career. Even if you never made it to England, you can still have a really great crack at some, money, life-changing finance. So, I think it's so exciting in the world of sport in England, particularly for women, but will still be great throughout. So, watch this space, I think, next season for me.
100%. Well, that's all we've got time for. What an amazing episode. It's been pretty lengthy as well. So,
one more thing. One more from me. You asked us for a couple of signed shirts last week. Here we go. Mealy Kerr, Under the Lid guest, kindly donated the kit that she actually doesn't have spare. But you tugged at her heartstrings, Jack. So there's Amelia Kerr's playing shirt and the entire New Zealand team's signatures. Plus, obviously I wouldn't have not been able to make this happen. Stole it off her back. And there we go. The entire women's signatures. Yes. Get it out there. Yes. And if they're not sure where to bid on this, send some messages in to us and we'll sort that for you.
please subscribe, leave a review, tell your mates. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. We'll get another superb guest on next week, but it's ta-ra for now.
Ta-ra, love.